What does Jackson Cantwell's commitment to Miami mean? And where is Xavier Griffin going to go now that he is decommitted?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal scoop. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Today's show is going to have some Rivals team rankings breakdown with Mr. John Garcia of Rivals. We're going to talk about Xavier Griffin. We're going to talk about commitments yesterday, Texas, Notre Dame, Illinois, and many other programs. Deion Sanders picked up a big commitment. But we are going to start off with Jackson Cantwell and what it means for the offensive tackle board and why an elite player like this can help the Miami Hurricanes. To help me do that, John Garcia Jr. of Rivals.com, as he does each and every week, joining the show. How you doing, John?
I'm doing well. Yeah. So much for the lull before official visit season, right? We thought late May, early June was going to be busy. And here we are in mid-May, extremely busy with some huge needle moving commitments. So always a good time to catch up.
Absolutely. Let's start off with that. Jackson Cantwell is somebody that you and I marveled at in January at Under Armour down in Orlando, your neck of the woods. And he finally comes off the board. It's going to be a Miami Hurricane. We were discussing that before the show, like how that went down. We're still not 100% sure, but I think Jackson is going to stick. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that and why Rivals has him as the number one overall recruit, which I do as well.
Well, look, let's start there. I mean, this is a lot of no-brainer number one 5-star type qualities, right? I mean, the physical is obvious. You look him up, you see him in person, you understand, hey, 6'6", 6'7", a well-carried 300-plus pounds, requisite length, requisite athleticism, a ton of left tackle experience. We got to see him at right tackle at Under Armour, where it didn't look like it was the first time he'd ever done it, and he's going against fellow All-Americans all the same. And then you start zooming out, and more pushes you towards that number one spot, whether you go to the track background, certainly the bloodlines with a couple of Olympians as parents. The academics here are really important. Very, very smart, bright kid. I think everyone who took in his commitment gathered that about Jackson. This is a kid with a good head on his shoulders, sort of a long-term business-like type kid, with a plan, and when you're splitting hairs between this elite recruit and that elite recruit, sometimes that can play a major role. I remember, debating number one in several classes in the past, sitting down with a guy like Caleb Williams, how thorough, how deep he could get. Trevor Lawrence, another number one guy who really made you think beyond, the arm strength and how pretty everything looked, whenever he operated. So I think when you're splitting hairs, all of those data points do come up. So not only does Cantwell feel like a home run number one guy, he also feels like a safe number one guy. And in this day and age of the craziness of college football, injuries, NIL, portal, all of those things, anyone who gives a safe projection with a sky-high ceiling simultaneously, probably going to get a lot of benefit of the doubt. So Cantwell gets all of that and then some, especially when you consider that, we talked about this before. The main question we had with him 6 months ago was competition. Who has he shown it against? But at Under Armour, as one of the youngest guys, in the event, playing against the majority, senior recruits, not only did he hold his own, he dominated. And he dominated against very, very good prospects in 25 and 26, including guys who were at one point maybe ranked higher, a Zion Ely, some of these great edge rushers that he had to contend with. And again, he flashed dominance against those guys simultaneously. So we've sort of seen everything we need to see to this point relative to Jackson Cantwell. It doesn't mean he finishes number one. Stranger things have happened, but right now just feels like not only the safest bet, but still that premium position guy with a sky high ceiling. So yeah, huge get. And you understand why this was such a big deal from the colleges. It's like, don't take our word for it. Think about the programs that were actually battling for this kid. You're talking Dan Lanning at Oregon, Kirby Smart at Georgia, and of course, Mario Cristobal at Miami at the forefront. But before that, in Missouri, which sends a bunch of guys to the league, was in there. Michigan, Ohio State. I mean, this was not a small deal. This was a huge national battle for 2 or 3 years, really. So if you don't take our word for it from a scouting standpoint, look at the schools, look at the reported dollar amounts that were associated with this recruitment, and it tells you that everyone had this kid number one or very, very close to number one on their board, regardless of position. So that's why it was such a big deal for Miami to win, especially against the perception that it was maybe a Georgia-Oregon race at one point. Miami was just always hanging around in that conversation. Oregon, maybe the early leader. Georgia certainly had the most buzz over the last month or two, especially getting that last unofficial visit. And then, of course, Miami was kind of sitting there at 2 or 3, depending on when you checked in. And that is, as recruiting history has told us, that is a good place to be in relative to verbal commitments and relative to National Signing Day, because things happen and kids pivot for one reason or another. So being that secondary school isn't as bad as maybe, it's perceived as, especially, in this day and age of the decision-making process. But I want to hit on one more point on JC. I think you mentioned it. This is a kid who has been recruited for many years and pushed back his verbal commitment. He was going to commit a couple weeks ago, pushed it back to this week because he wanted to be done. He wanted to be thorough, and he wanted to truly make this decision and move on. So I know we'll talk about decommitments later, and that will never go away in this industry. But I do get the sense, especially with the drama that has now been thrown on top of all of this relative to the NIL figures, I do think this is a final decision from Cantwell. And it's not something like Jared Curtis or Xavier Griffin, some of these other guys that where it's going to come up more and more. Hey, is this truly the end of the recruitment? Other schools will try, yes, but you get the sense with how Cantwell has handled this thing, his family, and just how long they've been recruited, you do get the sense that the verbal commitment is the final decision in this regard, which, again, reemphasizes why it was such a big deal for the youth.
With Cantwell moving to Miami, I assume Maui Noah, the big right tackle, will turn pro after this year. I think that's a plug-and-play kind of deal. And your point about Cantwell being a right tackle, ironically, at Under Armour, may work out for him because Maui Noah plays right tackle for the U. Do you think this is going to help Miami in terms of recruiting? I mean, they recruit well, but do you think other players will want to go play with Jackson, or does it really matter that much in your opinion?
Look, the number one recruit always has a cachet about him, and it pulls other recruits to a degree. It's usually a quarterback, so it's a little bit more tangible to track. Hey, this great quarterback commits, this wide receiver is now a little bit more interested in school X. It's not that cut and dry with Cantwell, but I think, again, the true national profile and certainly the reported NIL figures surrounding Cantwell's recruitment will have to draw in more attention for Miami. Look, they were already going to bring in a great O-line class. We know what Cristobal, Alex Mirabal, we know what they do as a battery between head coach and offensive line coach. Every year, 4, 5, 6 guys, great group, and a lot of those guys play relatively early. So I think that is taken care of already, and he's obviously now the headliner of that group. But I do think it opens a bit of a higher ceiling nationally. Can the Canes push more in the Midwest, where they've had some really nice splashes over the last few years? When you go to Lightfoot, who was a 5-star guy, Justin Scott, a 5-star guy a couple of years ago, and now Cantwell, every year they're splashing in the Midwest. Can they now push that further? Can they go to California? Do they go to Los Angeles more? And can you now truly go, coast to coast like the true Blue Bloods can, and win, not just battle, but win on a little bit more of a consistent basis? I think that's where you can see maybe Miami's ceiling pushed a little bit higher in what looks like it could be another, top 5 group for Mario Cristobal and company. So yeah, I think this absolutely helps. Definitely doesn't hurt. The momentum's with Miami. The buzz is all around Miami. And again, the NIL dollars, whether it's true or not, or how close, whatever it is, that perception absolutely helps Miami. It just is what it is in this day and age.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going around about the NIL, but knowing Jackson, I think he really wants to be with the people he's comfortable with. He's a pretty easygoing guy. I think he's just happy with Miami, regardless. He was going to be a millionaire wherever he went. When we come back, we're going to talk about somebody who did not commit, but actually decommitted. That is next here on the Portal Podcast. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Gametime, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off draws closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's an example. While you can save money on NBA playoff tickets, you can also go to a comedy show, go to the theater with your friends, or maybe you want to go and check out the opera. This is an opportunity with Gametime to save 60% off no matter what you're looking for. The all-in pricing also means that you don't have to worry about stressing about the price changing after you get to checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. John, we have a decommitment that you and I both kind of projected. We've talked about this off air before. Xavier Griffin from Gainesville High School, just a little bit northeast of Atlanta, was an elite outside linebacker prospect, pass rusher, committed to the USC Trojans pretty early. But now he is back on the market. Among the programs, Ohio State, Texas, Bama, and Florida State, in that order, have official visits lined up. USC is no longer in the mix. The whole official visit thing, now they have Chad Bowden there. He doesn't like that. So I don't know if USC will get back in it or not. But were you surprised that it happened right before official visit season, or were you actually more surprised it didn't happen quicker?
I'm probably more surprised at the latter. I'm just as surprised that Georgia isn't a school that is involved as much as maybe we thought at one point in this recruitment. But again, it's a different time in the process. If you're a top recruit in Atlanta, it's not a shoo-in that you're a Georgia Bulldog. I mean, look at Caleb Downs. Look at so many prospects over the years. We even talked about Trevor Lawrence earlier. It's not a shoo-in, in this day and age, even with the prestige that Georgia, especially with front seven guys, has rolled out on Saturdays and eventually on Sundays. But look, Griffin, a different kind of kid. Like you said, early commitment to USC, and he was convicted with that. That was something that happened, almost a year ago. It was last offseason when Justice Terry and those other guys committed to USC, and it was like, if anyone's going to stick, it might be the Griffin kid. It was a different feel when he made the decision, but as time rolled on, and this kid's got an unbelievable athletic profile, legitimate 6'2", 6'3", a long, wiry kid who looks like he might be a pass rusher, but he plays off the ball as well. Just one of these hybrid types that everybody wants and or needs on their defense. You just understood as time rolled on, it was going to be a lot harder to keep him away from those SEC powers. And naturally, as you mentioned, you look at the finalists, Alabama is in there, a school that has always been in the mix for him. I believe he's from the state of Alabama originally. And then Texas. Texas is just not to be discounted really for anyone anymore, no matter where the location is. I mean, Texas has gone into Miami, New Orleans. They've gone into Atlanta. They go into these metro areas that produce elite prospects and pull elite talent out. We just mentioned Justice Terry. One of the biggest surprises of last cycle was Texas winning out over Georgia for a kid from not such a metro area in the state of Georgia on the defensive line, which would have been just inconceivable a couple of years ago. But again, this is a new day and age in recruiting. So certainly won't rule out Texas. I saw Dia Bell, the quarterback commitment for the Longhorns, giving Xavier a bit of a shout before he sets up that official visit. And then Ohio State is one of the other contenders. Again, how could anybody rule out Ohio State based on what they've done on the field and in recruiting over the years? So I do think a true battle is ahead. I'd give a little bit of a lean towards Alabama just because of the roots in the Yellowhammer State. And look, he's in Gainesville, Georgia, very close proximity to the state of Alabama, just a couple hours away from Tuscaloosa itself. So you understand why there might be a lean there towards the Crimson Tide. But kid's going to take his visits and be thorough, especially this time around. So a little bit surprised Georgia's not in there. Maybe more surprised USC appears to be all the way out in this recruitment. That's not always the case, but it looks like Griffin's probably more likely to stay a lot closer to home than previously considered.
Let's stick with Texas. You were just talking about them. Jermaine Bishop committed to the Longhorns, a kid from the same high school as DJ Lagway, Willis, Texas, just outside of Houston. He's a burner. Texas has got a class now with 7 commitments. They're only ranked 29th by rivals. Bama's got 5 commitments. They're 25th. Michigan's got 5 commitments. They're 40th. I try to tell people, and I just want you to reiterate this, it's not too late for these schools. And this, if you really follow it, and you and I do, obviously, this is par for the course for the elite schools, in my opinion, because they're going after elite players that generally wait a little longer. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's usually the panic button shouldn't even be on the desk until you get to about, preseason kickoff time. I mean, that's really when you should have a decent foundation towards your recruiting class. But honestly, if you're a true blue blood, a legitimate blue blood, I mean, look at what Florida did last year with a very thin group all off season because of the chatter around Billy Napier. But what happens on the field, things get corrected and recruiting sort of takes care of itself. So if you're a legitimate powerhouse or have the potential to be one, the season can still throw your recruitment or your recruiting class upside down in a good way or otherwise. But for the most part, I think the general rule with these summer official visits is if you get through the month of June and you're still 5, 6, 7 commitments, I think you do start to worry just a little bit, because that's the time where now the majority of official visits are going down, right? Beginning that May 30th weekend, the bulk of every school will have official visitors every single weekend. And you hope to pluck a kid or two really every single time you put so much money and effort into a recruiting weekend. So I think for those programs that you mentioned, Alabama, Michigan, et cetera, I mean, this is going to be an official visit play. And you see these recruits setting up 3, 4, 5, 6 official visits. Most of those are going to go down at the end of May and throughout the entire month of June. So if we get to, the 4th of July commitment window, a lot of kids want to commit when there's fireworks going on anyway. If you get past that point and you still are sitting at 5 or 6 commitments, maybe that panic button can come to the desk a little bit, but yet and still, if you are a blue blood, it sort of doesn't matter. It will take care of itself as you get closer to Thanksgiving and into early National Signing Day. So for most programs, keep an eye on the month of June. Beyond that point, have a good season and hope for the best.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen here for those of you on YouTube, and I'll read this off with John here. Based on the players, shall we say, that are big time talents, I believe USC, it's going to be hard for them not to finish with the top class. This is rivals top 10. You got SC 1, Notre Dame 2, Ohio State 3, Clemson 4, Penn State comes in at 5, LSU, A&M, Miami. Kansas is the one that's probably not going to end up in the top 10. I think that's pretty safe. But they're off to a great start. Congrats to them. And then right after that, program that quite honestly has earned a little bit of respect, and I'm surprised they're not a little bit higher, and that's Oregon at number 10. John, is there anybody in that list besides Kansas that you're surprised by?
Yeah, I think Texas A&M is a little surprising. They've had some splashes very early in this offseason. Look, the Aggies, again, resource-wise, are right up there with anyone, but it's where they've reeled in commitments. I think we talked about this a few shows ago. They've done incredibly well in the Atlanta metro area, just not what you would expect, from 100 degrees, zoomed out with the Aggies. You would expect a bunch of, Texas, Oklahoma, into Louisiana, those type of recruits, and they're still doing well in those areas. But the emphasis in Georgia, I think, will be fascinating with some of those verbal commitments, the Jordan Carters of the world. How does that look in a few months as maybe they hit the road and take some visits themselves? I think that will be fascinating to keep an eye on. So they're one that I'm curious about. Miami's new in there with the Cantwell commitment, jumping into the top 10. I do think they've got an opportunity to rise. The other surprise, and this might not make sense to the conventional college football fan, to me, the surprise up there, besides USC at number one, with so much volume and so much emphasis and resources pushed into that program, the surprise to me is Clemson at number four. I think we've seen Miami dominate the ACC since Cristobal got the gig. We've seen Dabo Swinney sort of recruiting to his own tune, getting quote unquote Clemson guys to jump in, and they're still doing that. But the difference is that this group of Clemson guys is very, very talented. They've got some stacked positions already on board. The O-line group, the wide receiver group looks elite at Clemson, and they're looking to add to some of those positions here going forward. Also got multiple quarterbacks committed. So a unique group at Clemson. And if they finish number four, watch out, because Clemson is not one of these programs like Georgia, Alabama, LSU, A&M that finishes Oregon towards that number one spot. That's not typically what they do. Clemson's more of a top 10 to 15 type of program that takes lower volume. But if they stay in this top 5 range and pace with these other programs, I mean, just look at the names next to them, Ohio State, Notre Dame, etc. If they pace that way, we could see a big swing from a talent perspective coming back into Death Valley relative to the ACC. And from a talent standpoint, the gap between Clemson and Miami and maybe everyone else could be widening, as time goes forward. So Clemson is a very interesting number 4 program in recruiting right now. I would love to snapshot that and zoom forward to see, if the Tigers can keep up that momentum. But I think just about everyone else besides Kansas will have an opportunity to stay in that group or move up, because you expect the Oregons, the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Auburns of the world to certainly climb, Texas to climb that list and contend in the top 10 here as we get closer to the season.
John, we still have to talk about Deion Sanders, a little bit about Notre Dame, and again, Jermaine Bishop committed to Texas. That is next here on the Portal Podcast. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices, no console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. Max, Paramount Plus, Disney, anything you can imagine, you can get on a Fire Stick. I use mine all the time, and I love to use it for just about anything, especially YouTube. Head over to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube, third generation. All right, John, let's talk a little bit about the recent commitments. Like I said, Texas, they get Jermaine Bishop, one of the top athletes in the country. I don't even know if he's going to play receiver or DB. There's even a little discussion for him playing both, which I'm a little nervous when I hear that.
Good luck.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. He's not the biggest guy in the world either. He's smaller than what Travis was at Colorado. He's listed like 155, 160 pounds. I'm not sure, but man, he can really, really run. Texas, I expect to end up with a top 8 class, conservatively. Top 5 is still very, very much in play because their official visit list is elite. Notre Dame's probably a little more surprising to me. They go out and get their second running back. They got Jonas Walton, kid from Central High School, not that far off from where I live. He's just outside of Atlanta, a little bit west in Carrollton. Are you as surprised as I am that Notre Dame started off this hot in recruiting? Not just number, but quality. Texas, they'll get theirs. I think we both agree. But what about Notre Dame?
Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, this is a program that you expect in that top 10 range. Kind of like we talked about earlier with Clemson, you expect them to go get their guys, recruit nationally, but maybe, fall as the year progresses. But look, Notre Dame's remaining aggressive with this thing. And they're not only going out and winning battles for, prospects in states where you would expect, Texas, California is usually the, sort of some bread and butter with the Irish outside of Big Ten country. But, going down to Atlanta, going down to Florida to get key recruits, I think is huge for the Irish. And, man, I love this running back battery between Osborne and Walton. I mean, guys who not only fit, Notre Dame off the field and a physical style on the field, but sort of complement one another. And physically, height, weight, speed, vision, experience, production, ready to go right now. Not guys who you're expecting to sit 2, 3, 4 years, in the Irish backfield before, they get a couple carries to their name. So I really like what Notre Dame is doing. If you would have told me 6 months ago, USC is number 1, Notre Dame's number 2 in recruiting, I'd have said, what happened? Like, what is going on with college football recruiting? But that's where we are. USC's volume is overwhelming relative to the algorithms, that put these things together. But Notre Dame's got the star power. Notre Dame's got average nearly, 3.94 stars per commitment. So basically averaging a blue chipper every time, somebody announces for the Irish. That's an incredibly big deal. For reference, I think there's only, 5 or 6 programs that have a higher number, yet they don't have near the volume that Notre Dame has, So I do think that is another indication that it's not just quantity, but there's quality, coming to South Bend. And again, they're winning key battles against fellow blue bloods nationally in some areas that we're not, accustomed to seeing Notre Dame go out and have a lot of success in. So I think that's just a testament to the modern approach and the aggressive approach from Marcus Freeman on down.
Yeah, I agree. They've done a really nice job, but now they got to finish. Speaking of something that's a little surprising, I don't know if it's a trend, but I think it could be Gavin Mueller. I'm not sure how he pronounces it. Big tight end out of the Chicagoland area commits to Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes. Do you think they're trying to trend? I kind of do myself towards a few more high school recruits because they usually get like 6 to 10, somewhere in that range. Do you think the Buffs are headed towards more?
I think they have to. I mean, I think this is something that, we understand from a simple business perspective. The transfer portal is always a temporary fix, right? And there can be some perils if you rely on the portal, to continue to replenish your talent. Look, Florida State's the glaring example over the last 2 years. It worked very, very well in 23, and it was awful in 24. So I think you have to supplement from the high school ranks. I mean, if you look at the best programs, the schools that are in the playoff and contending for national titles, they are still very much high school driven. That depth, especially as these college seasons get longer, and they're talking now about an expanded playoff already. As that conversation continues to head solely in one direction, you've got to have depth. You've got to be able to build it. And really the conventional way through scholarships, expanded rosters is going to be through the high school ranks. It's just something that has to happen. So Deion is playing both sides very well. He's struck gold with his high school recruits and the portal alike at the very, very top. So now he's just got to push more, from a depth standpoint. And he understands that. We've seen Colorado among the more aggressive programs setting these official visits. And they had kids, Jake Cruel and those guys were on campus 2-3 weeks ago for their official. So usually we talk about the month of June. They started the first week of May. So Colorado is trying to get ahead of others in terms of getting kids on campus. And look, when kids go to Boulder, particularly from outside of that Big 12, Pac-12 footprint, it is memorable. These Floridians, these East Coasters go over there and they don't forget it. And then you throw on the Coach Prime effect and the spotlight, the exposure. And Colorado becomes an interesting dark horse for every top recruit in the country once they get on campus. And that is exactly what has happened. And they're starting to stack up visits, which ultimately will lead to more verbal commitments. And I see them more aggressive, not only in trying to set these trips with early top targets. Now they're going after guys committed to other schools, and those kids' ears are perking up. Maybe they hadn't heard from a lot of schools in a while, and then boom, Coach Prime offers you, and now you're like, wait, do I need to go out there? What about my commitment? I mean, it really is throwing a wrench into a lot of recruitment. So not only do I think they're going to have more volume in this class of 26 from the high school ranks, I think the star power is going to, come along with it. Doesn't mean it's going to be a top 10, top 20 type class. But if the Buffs, from a high school standpoint, can recruit at a top 30, 35 clip with what they do in the portal, I think is going to say a lot about, the sustainability of this rise that Coach Prime has fathered.
I agree. If Colorado can just add just a handful more each and every year from the high school ranks, their program will have more stability, especially if they can get linemen. Offensive linemen that's been a premium for everybody, and it's been hard for the Buffaloes they can do that, it would really change that program. John, tell everybody where they can find your work.
Yes, sir. Real simple. Rivals.com. New rankings out as you talked about earlier. Atlanta camp this weekend. So a lot going on. Check out the website, rivals.com.
Absolutely. You can find the Portal Podcast wherever you get your pods and on YouTube, free and available everywhere. Thank you very much. Please like and subscribe and comment on this podcast. We will see you again soon on the Portal Podcast.